A while ago, I made a video talking about which classes you should play in Conquest of Azeroth. Since then, a lot has changed, not just because of updates, but because thousands of players have spent more time experimenting with different classes, builds, and playstyles. And after reading hundreds of comments, talking to other players, watching dungeon runs, and spending more time in the game myself, I realized something. People aren't actually asking, which class is the strongest? They're asking something completely different. They're asking, which class is the strongest for me? And those are two very different questions. Because here's the truth. The best class for a solo player isn't always the best class for someone who only runs dungeons. The class that's amazing for experienced players might feel terrible if you're brand new. Some classes are incredibly rewarding, but only after you've invested dozens of hours learning them. Others feel fantastic almost immediately. So instead of making another generic ranking, today we're doing something different. Instead of asking, which class is number one? We're asking, which class should you actually play? We'll look at different types of players, different goals, different playstyles, and by the end of this video, you should have a much better idea of which class really fits you. Let's get started. First, stop looking for the perfect class. One thing I've noticed over the last few months is that players spend way too much time searching for the perfect class. They compare tier lists, watch build videos, read comments, ask Discord, ask Reddit. Then, they finally create a character, only to re-roll 2 days later because someone said another class does slightly more damage. Sound familiar? Here's what I've learned. The perfect class doesn't exist. Seriously, every class has strengths. Every class has weaknesses. Every class has players who absolutely love it. And every class has players who quit after an hour. That's completely normal. Instead of asking, what's the strongest class? Ask yourself something much more useful. What kind of gameplay makes me excited to log in? Because that's the answer that actually matters. If you want fast-paced gameplay, let's start with players who hate standing still. You don't enjoy waiting. You like pressing buttons, moving constantly, making quick decisions. You want every fight to feel active. If that's you, there are certain classes that naturally fit that style much better than others. These are the classes that reward quick reactions, good positioning, fast decision-making. They're exciting because you're always doing something, but they also ask more from the player. If you enjoy mastering difficult mechanics, you'll probably love them. If you prefer a slower, more methodical approach, they might feel exhausting after a long play session. That's why it's so important to be honest with yourself. Just because a fast class looks exciting in someone else's gameplay doesn't mean you'll enjoy playing it for 50 hours. Sometimes, the class that looks less flashy ends up being the one you enjoy the most. If you love big numbers. Now let's talk about another type of player. Maybe you don't care about speed. You care about impact. You want abilities that feel powerful. You enjoy seeing huge critical hits, big burst windows, massive spell effects. There's something incredibly satisfying about watching a perfectly timed ability completely change a fight. If that's what motivates you, you'll probably enjoy classes built around explosive damage windows rather than constant pressure. These classes often reward patience, knowing exactly when to commit your cooldowns, understanding boss mechanics, and waiting for the perfect opportunity. The payoff can feel incredible, but it also means you need discipline. Sometimes, not pressing a button immediately is actually the correct decision. That's something newer players don't always realize. So we've talked about players who love fast gameplay and players who love huge damage. But what if your priority isn't damage at all? What if you simply want the smoothest, most enjoyable experience from the moment you create your character? That's what we're looking at next. If you want the smoothest leveling experience, let's be honest, not everyone enjoys struggling through the early game. Some players just want to log in, complete quests, clear enemies without too much trouble, and enjoy the journey. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If that's your goal, then your first class should feel comfortable from the very beginning. You don't want every elite enemy turning into a 5-minute fight. You don't want to stop after every pull just to recover. You don't want leveling to feel like work. Instead, look for classes that have reliable damage, good survivability, and enough flexibility to handle different situations without constantly changing your build. The funny thing is, a class doesn't have to be the strongest in the game to feel amazing while leveling. Sometimes consistency is far more valuable than raw damage. Finishing every fight comfortably is often better than occasionally doing huge damage but constantly finding yourself in trouble, especially if you're still learning the game. If you love playing with friends. Now let's talk about group players. Maybe you don't spend much time playing alone. Maybe you always have friends online. Or maybe your goal is running dungeons every chance you get. If that's you, think about what role you naturally enjoy in a team. Some people love being the hero who saves everyone. Others enjoy leading the group. Some just want to focus on dealing as much damage as possible. There isn't a wrong answer, but there is usually one answer that feels more natural. I've noticed something interesting over the years. Players who pick classes that complement their personality usually stick with them much longer. If you're always the person organizing things, you'll probably enjoy classes that take more responsibility. If you're someone who enjoys helping everyone succeed, support-focused classes can be incredibly rewarding. And if you simply enjoy mastering your own rotation, you'll probably have the most fun focusing on damage. The important thing isn't copying your friend's class. It's choosing something that complements the way you naturally like to play. Don't ignore difficulty. Here's another mistake I see all the time. Players automatically assume that harder classes are better. They're not. Some classes have a much steeper learning curve. That doesn't mean they're stronger. It simply means they ask more from the player. More awareness. More resource management. Better timing. Better positioning. If that challenge sounds exciting, go for it. But don't feel pressured into choosing a difficult class just because someone online called it high skill. Sometimes the easier class is actually the smarter choice. Because instead of fighting your own rotation, you're learning boss mechanics, dungeon routes, enemy abilities. You'll often improve much faster that way. Remember, a class that's comfortable to play will almost always outperform a difficult class that you never fully understand. The biggest trap new players fall into. If you've never played Conquest of Azeroth before, listen carefully. This mistake catches almost everyone. They spend hours researching, watching videos, reading comments, comparing builds, looking at tier lists, trying to find the perfect class. Then, they finally create a character, play for an hour, and immediately start wondering if they should reroll. Not because they dislike the class, but because they watched another video saying something else was stronger. That's a terrible cycle to fall into. You'll never actually learn your class if you're constantly switching. Every time you reroll, you're starting over, learning new abilities, new talents, new mechanics. Instead, give yourself time. Learn the class. Understand the rotation. Experiment with different talents. You might be surprised how much more enjoyable a class becomes once everything starts clicking. Every class has a learning curve. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Every class feels a little awkward at first. You're reading abilities, trying to remember your keybinds, learning cooldown timing, understanding resource management. Nobody feels like an expert on day one, and that's completely normal. The players who become amazing at their class aren't necessarily the ones who picked the strongest option. They're the ones who stuck with it long enough to become comfortable. Eventually, you stop looking at your action bars. Your rotation becomes automatic. Your attention shifts toward boss mechanics, team positioning, and making smarter decisions. That's when the game becomes much more enjoyable. So we've talked about different personalities, different goals, and different ways to approach choosing a class. But before you hit that create character button, there's one last piece of advice that I think every new player needs to hear. And honestly, it might be the most important point in this entire video. The class you'll play the longest is usually the best one. Before we wrap up, I want to tell you something that I wish someone had told me years ago. The class you'll enjoy the most is usually the class you'll become the best at. Think about it. If you genuinely enjoy your class, you'll naturally want to log in more often. You'll experiment with different builds. You'll learn your talents. You'll understand your cooldowns. You'll start noticing little optimizations without even trying. That improvement happens because you're having fun, not because someone forced you to play the current meta. On the other hand, if you're playing a class just because it's ranked S tier, but you don't actually enjoy it, you're probably not going to stick with it. Eventually, you'll stop logging in, or you'll reroll, or you'll constantly wonder if another class would have been a better choice. That's why I always tell new players this. Don't chase the strongest class. Chase the class that makes you excited to hit the play button, because in the long run, that class almost always ends up being the right decision. If I had to recommend classes based on personality, so If I were sitting next to a brand new player today, here's how I'd help them decide. If you're someone who loves being in the middle of the action, likes fast-paced gameplay, and enjoys constantly pressing abilities, look for classes that reward aggressive, active combat. If you're more patient, enjoy planning ahead, managing resources, or setting up powerful moments, you'll probably enjoy classes that reward timing and preparation. If you like helping other players, leading groups, or making the difference between success and failure, don't ignore support-oriented options. Those players are always valuable. And if you're the kind of player who simply wants to explore the game without worrying too much about optimization, choose a class that feels comfortable, reliable, easy to understand. You'll have a much smoother first experience. Notice something? I still haven't said one class is the best. Because honestly, there isn't one. Different players enjoy different things. That's one of the biggest strengths of Conquest of Azeroth. There's room for almost every playstyle. Your first choice doesn't have to be your last. Here's another piece of advice that takes a lot of pressure off. Your first class doesn't have to become your forever class. In fact, for many players, it won't. And that's okay. Every class teaches you something. Maybe your first character helps you understand positioning. Your second teaches resource management. Your third helps you improve your awareness. Every hour you spend learning the game makes your next character even better. So don't be afraid to experiment later. The important thing is getting started. Because experience will teach you far more than another 10 hours of comparing tier lists. Stop waiting for the perfect time. I've seen this happen more times than I can count. Players spend days researching, watching guides, reading comments, comparing builds, waiting for the next update, waiting for the next balance patch, waiting for someone to declare the best class. Meanwhile, other players simply log in, create a character, and start having fun. Guess which group usually progresses faster? Exactly. Information is useful. Guides are useful. But eventually, you have to stop researching and start playing. Because no guide, not even this one, can replace the experience you'll gain from actually spending time with a class. Final thoughts. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this video, it's this. There is no perfect class. There is only the class that's perfect for you. The one that matches your personality, your goals, your favorite playstyle, your pace. Some players love leading the group. Some love chasing huge damage. Some enjoy supporting everyone around them. Some simply want a relaxed leveling experience. And that's exactly why Conquest of Azeroth has so many different classes to choose from. No matter how you enjoy playing, there's probably a class that feels like it was designed specifically for you. So don't stress about making the wrong choice. Choose the class that looks the most fun. Give yourself time to learn it. And most importantly, enjoy the journey. So that's part 2 of my Which Classes Should You Play in Conquest of Azeroth series. Hopefully this video helped you think about class selection in a different way. Instead of asking, what's the strongest class? Start asking, what's the strongest class for the way I like to play? That's the question that usually leads to the best answer. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. It really helps the channel. And subscribe if you want more Conquest of Azeroth content. I've got more class guides, build guides, gold farming guides, beginner tutorials, profession guides, mythic dungeon tips, raid guides, and plenty more videos on the way. And now I want to hear from you. If you had to recommend just one class to a brand new player, which class would you choose, and why? Leave your answer in the comments. I'm really curious to see which classes the community recommends the most. Thanks for watching. And I'll see you in the next Conquest of Azeroth guide.